My Cheryl and I own a farm in Buckingham, Iowa, where we mainly grow corn. This was in August of 2018 on a slightly rainy night. Cheryl and I have both spent our entire lives in the farm life. It's really all we know. Of course, farm life in Iowa means lots of space and very few people. Our close neighbors, George and Kenny, were each about half a mile away in opposite directions. Also farmers. With not much else going on around here, it's easy to become friends with your neighbors. We often have George and Kenny and their wives over and vice versa. On the otherwise normal weekend night, we had George and his wife over for drinks. We all got pretty drunk while playing board games. They left around 11. Luckily, it's a 30-second straight line of a drive home. We continued to drink some wine as we watched one of our favorite movies. We were starting to get tired. We were definitely feeling the effects of the wine. We were most likely just going to fall asleep on the couch cuddled up together when there was a knock at the front door. A knock at the door at this hour was unusual. In fact, it never happened before. But with the knocks, we thought we could hear a voice say something. I lowered the volume of the TV. We waited for it to happen again. Like 20 seconds later, another set of knocks at the door followed by a muffled voice saying we need help. I was about to get up and open the door when Cheryl shook my arm and I looked at her and she made a face and shook her head. No. I whispered, I'm just going to ask who it is. She replied. I shouldn't let them know we're home, but odds are they already knew we were home. I went over to the door and asked, who is it? The voice on the other side said through the door, oh, thank God. Can you up? We're lost. I said, who's we? The voice said back, my wife and I. I replied, can your wife say something? There was silence for a few seconds. I followed it up with, did you hear me? The same voice said back, yeah, but she's not next to me right now. This is where red flags started going off in my head and I started to realize the voice sounded a little off. Like I'm trying to make his voice sound a little higher. I laughed and said, George, is that you? George was a big goof and him being drunk, it wouldn't be unheard of for him to do something like this. The voice said back, yeah. In a slightly deeper voice. Now I almost felt relief believing that it was actually George. But I didn't open the door just yet before confirming having someone knock on your door out here late at night, claiming to be lost. Doesn't happen. It's a thing, and it's an immediate cause for alarm. I said through the door, prove it. What's your wife's name? A now unfamiliar voice said back, that's a trick question. My smile disappeared. I went on my phone and called George. Cheryl was watching the whole thing, telling me we should call the police. I said hold on. The phone rang like 3 times before George picked up right away. I said, are you at my front door right now? And he no. Why? I told him there was someone at our front door trying to trick me into opening it. He said he'll hurry right over, and we hung up. Keep in mind, all of us were still drunk during this.
They were again at the door. I yelled, I have a shotgun waiting for you if you don't leave here now. The voice said back, we're just trying to use a phone. That's all we need. Cheryl called 911, which out here it takes an extremely long time for an officer to arrive on scene. We heard footsteps walking around our wooden deck that wraps around the house. A couple sets of footsteps, actually. They stopped at one of our windows, which had the blinds closed, and we heard one of them attempting to lift the window open. This caused Cheryl, who was still on the phone with 911, to scream, leave us alone. I followed suit and screamed at the top of my lungs to get the fuck out of here or I'll shoot you. It took me that long to think, to run upstairs, to grab my shotgun from the closet. Literally. A few seconds later, there were more pounds at the door. And this time it was actually George's voice yelling, open up. I let George in, who also brought his shotgun. He didn't see anything or anyone as he pulled up. He stayed with us until a police officer came to the house. He did a quick little scan of the property with us, then left. We took heed of his advice in installing a camera on the front and back. Surprisingly, something we never thought of until this incident. Still gives me chills. That all that was keeping out whoever was on our front deck that night was a wooden door. This story takes place at my grandparents' farm in the summer of 2018. I was alone one night since my grandparents were away. I was getting paid to watch the farm for a couple nights. On the last night, I was watching TV in the living room and I started to hear a strange noise coming from outside in the cornfield. At first I shrugged it off because I figured it was most likely a deer.
But I was about to go outside. I heard a very high-pitched cow scream. I stood still for a while, shaking in my boots. Something terribly wrong was going on with the cows. I quickly ran upstairs to my grandpa's room under his bed. He always keeps a few guns. I was hunting rifle and went outside. The cows still would not stop mowing, so I went into the barn to check. There was nothing out of the ordinary. All the cows were still here. That was until I walked further down and noticed that one cow was missing from his stall. It did sense. I was sure he was tied up to the stall the last time I saw him. Then I thought I could hear a cow make a high-pitched moo sound from the cornfield outside the barn. So I went outside. But while I was walking to the field, I swear I heard what sounded like people talking. I finally had enough of this. I fired 2 rounds into the air. Ev went silent. The cows were quiet, and I couldn't hear anything from the field. That was until I heard the footsteps in the field. I didn't know if I had the balls to go inside the cornfield, but I had to do it anyway. This is the exact reason farmers have guns. And I just hide inside the house with trespassers in the field. I started to walk into the crops, and I could hear many pairs of footsteps all beside me. I was getting even more freaked out as I continued to walk deeper into the field. And then I froze down one of the rows of corn. There was a person in all black standing a few feet away from me. I rose my gun up, telling him to get out of my field. I wasn't bluffing. I was ready to shoot. But he never moved. So I fired another round into the air to scare him off, but he still didn't move an inch. Then he started walking towards me with his arms slightly out, as if telling me to lower my weapon. I aimed my gun at him again, screaming at him to go away. That made the horrible realization that I was surrounded by people dressed in dark clothing, like at least 6 or 7 other people. That was only the people I could see. Who knows if there were more? And as I got closer, I realized something. He, along with the rest, were all wearing these creepy masks. The man stopped approaching me as I started stepping backwards. They all stood in silence for a moment. I cannot explain the fear that I was experiencing. I was about to be killed. That was when they all started chanting something. I couldn't understand it. It sounded like a different language, but the chants almost sounded like a song. And I started wondering if they were about to perform some kind of sick ritual on me. That took the opportunity to run as fast as I could down a few rows of corn. When I was out of breath, I stopped and fired about 6 rounds in their direction. I heard a bunch of footsteps and rustling crops going in the opposite direction.
I scared them off. I ran back towards the direction of the farmhouse and stopped. I saw something on the ground and what I saw has stuck with me, scarred me. There was a cow head sitting in the middle of a circle of candles. I wanted to yak, and as soon as I got back to the farmhouse, I did. I grabbed the house phone and called the police. I told the operator everything to the best of my ability. She said that an officer would be there soon after I got off the phone with the police. I called my parents explaining the situation and asked them to come pick me up. My dad said he'd be there in an hour. I sat upstairs in my grandpa's room, shaking and crying at the same time, waiting for what felt like an eternity until I finally heard a police car outside. I ran outside to the officer and never felt happier in my life. I told everything to the officer. He saw the barn and then a little bit of the cornfield, and he found the cow head. He called up a search team after that, as this was now an active crime scene. When my parents arrived, I, along with the first officer, had to talk with them about everything that happened. Thankfully, my parents took me home after that. My grandparents took this very seriously, of course, and installed a high-tech security camera system all over the farm. Who knows what kind of group that was, but clearly they were doing some kind of animal sacrifice ritual or something. I just happened to be the unlucky one. Home alone on the farm. They chose to do it at